This is the IEEE Computer Society Distinguished Lecturer Webinar Series, brought to you by the Distinguished Visitors Program. The Distinguished Visitors Program delivers tools for individuals at all stages of their professional careers through visits to chapters, offering opportunities for individual interactions, and to the membership through webinars by respected professionals. We have distinguished visitors who cover machine learning, cybersecurity, robotics, big data, cloud computing, blockchain, and cryptography, among others. Chapters can request a distinguished visitor on computer.org/distinguished-visitors. The Computer Society pays all intercity travel, while chapters are responsible for all costs with regard to the hosting of the distinguished visitor, such as lodging, transportation, and food and incidentals in the city of the presentation. The Distinguished Visitors Program is able to pay up to $1,000 for a visit to a chapter, but by working with other nearby chapters to develop a tour, that amount can be increased. So when your chapter is planning its next event, think of the Distinguished Visitors Program. Welcome to the Distinguished Lecturer Webinar Series. My name is Kerry Cosby, and I'm the Chapters Manager at the IEEE Computer Society. I oversee our more than 600 professional and student chapters around the world and manage our Distinguished Visitors Program. I'd like to take care of some housekeeping tasks before we get started. You can ask your questions in the Q&A panel. Dr. Milojicic will answer as many questions as he can following the presentation. When you're writing your questions, if it relates to a particular slide, please do your best to reference that slide. The webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be made available after the webinar. Industry trends can shift dramatically along with societal changes. The Computer Society provides communities, events, and other resources that enable continued learning and exploration in these trends to help the community navigate and prepare for them. This year alone, over 14,000 articles have been published on computing research and trends in the Computer Society Digital Library, including from IEEE Computer Magazine, which publishes the latest trends affecting computing professionals. Furthermore, you can connect and grow with other professionals via our technical committees. More information will be shared after the webinar. You can also learn more at computer.org. In today's webinar, Dr. Dejan Milojicic will discuss the future of workforce. This webinar is brought to you through a partnership among the Computer Society Distinguished Visitors Program, the Corporate Liaison Program of the IEEE Santa Clara Valley Section, and the IEEE Computer Society chapter of the Santa Clara Valley Section. This webinar will focus attention on the potential technologies and long-term visions of the future workforce explored by the 10 sponsored panels organized by the IEEE industry engagement around the world, and bring together industry, academia, government, and professional organizational leaders. The group addressed current and future-looking 15 factors and 15 technologies. They discussed how they can be applied towards future global workforce planning. In this presentation, Dr. Milojicic will offer some immediate results and will eventually comprise a comprehensive report made available globally. I'd like to introduce our speaker. Dr. Dejan S. Milojicic is a distinguished technologist and director at Hewlett-Packard Labs, Palo Alto, California. Previously, he worked with the OSF Research Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Institute Mihajlo Pupin, Belgrade, Serbia. His areas of expertise include system, software, and distributed systems. He received his PhD from the University of Kaiserslautern. I apologize for my pronunciation of that, in Germany, and his MSc and BSc from Belgrade University in Serbia. Dejan was a managing director of the open Cirrus cloud computing testbed. Dejan has also over 200 papers, 2 books, and 68 granted patents. Dejan is the IEEE Fellow ACM Distinguished Engineer and HKN and USENIX member. He was president of the IEEE Computer Society and IEEE presidential candidate. He's been on many conference program committees and journal editorial boards. Dr. Milojicic, I'd like to pass the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Highly appreciate it. I will talk to you today about future of workflow, the future of the workforce that we have been approximately working through the last year or so. Why this discussion in the first place? As most of you are very well aware, this pandemic, COVID pandemic, has created stress, literally stress on the whole of humankind existence. It's primary about our lives, but also privacy versus social benefits, a global work organization, supply chain, logistics, and many, many, many other things. As a consequence, we have witnessed digital transformation that took place, again, about not only our work, but education, private life. And in many cases, it was acceleration. In other cases, it was rather a digital crutch. And this digital crutch may disappear. Some other consequences may remain for longer time. We would like to understand what these are. Technologies in the process played a crucial role. And more than at any time in the past, it was really important to predict what is going on, not just with technologies, but going to the bare pandemic. What do we do? Do we close business? Do we close restaurants? How we deal with it? How we rebalance supply chains, and many, many other topics. So our hypothesis going into this was that, as Carrie read earlier, combination of many economical, ecological, technological, and societal factors, as well as enabling technologies, will result in a major shift in the future of workforce. And that shift is going to stay beyond pandemic. To better address these changes, we wanted to educate and influence global industries, that is corporations, academia, universities around the world, and governments around the world, as well as professional organizations, as we do here, through recommendations to better adjust. And this is the goal of this document and this presentation that I'm giving to you. In the process, we organized a series of panels around the world. You'll see soon where we held them. And we will broadly share these to influence the previous entities. The process was that report will be only successful as every individual panel was, and together we will share this information as I will today. I have a disclaimer that because it ran over the course of a year, many things have changed. As you know, pandemic has changed, our reaction to it has changed. And also, while we strive for diversity, the ultimate insights depend on who we spoke to. We also ran a survey of about 15,000 sent emails, of which we got about 10%, and that helped alleviate this diversity that didn't exist in the panels. Finally, the final recommendations are really distillation of authors of all this information. So if anything fails, it's up to us. So here's how we started. We started in December of 2020, and then I carefully chose, there's some method to this madness, how we travel the world. I carefully chose those countries, those regions, those continents that will contribute to reshaping the workforce first. That's why we traveled to India. All this travel was obviously virtual. Then to China, then to Sub-Saharan Africa, then to Latin America, then to Europe, Middle East, and North Africa, which I felt was more coherent compared to Sub-Saharan Africa, more of a similar background. Then we went to the North America, including Canada. And we will follow with a report that we're just writing now. And every time we would put more information, and even this time we put more insights in preparation for this presentation. So the status is that we spoke in about 2-hour sessions with overall 184 attendees, A lot of them are at CXO level, young professionals, some life members. We discussed these 15 factors, 15 technologies. In the process, we created about 210 slides. We gave also some side presentation, of which this is one. We gave first in Switch 2020 in Singapore and a few others. We also gave a panel on ComSec. We also solicited input for all major organizational units of IEEE who contributed some relevant materials. Next steps, and I will follow up with the next steps later on once you have understood what we've done, is that we are right now writing a report. We're deriving insights from the survey. There's a lot of insights. We are again presented at Switch a year later. We'll release a report and then go around the world again selectively and present results. What you'll listen next is some of the early insights. This is what we presented before to most of these panels around the world. So we've taken three prone views. The first is regional. So for example, US workforce, European workforce, both influence the push towards automation increase. There's a lot of inequality increase, and there's a lot of details about these regions. So our question was, what could these regions do to improve? They can invest massively in remote work infrastructure such as broadband, wireless, Wi-Fi. They can revamp legislations around equity in this hybrid mode, remote work economy. Then we've taken corporate view. So there's this permanent transition to remote and hybrid workforce models, which could have dramatic effects on corporates. There's a larger potential pool of available talent, so you can recruit almost anywhere. But on the flip side, higher workforce mobility increased competition for talent. So you can easily lose existing talent to others from anywhere in the world. There's a shift of capital resources, and then there are many challenges. So what could corporations, companies do? They can adopt and adapt advanced remote work beyond Zoom. They can introduce assisted reality, virtual reality, asynchronous workflows, AI-assisted communication, digital twins, and many other things. And they can also review, rewrite, and reboot major company policies, which they do. I witnessed that in my company and in others. And finally, there's individual view. There are different individuals. Some are broad, others are deep. Very few are T-shaped, and even many fewer are pie-shaped, those who can both be broad and then deep in two areas. Organizations, on contrary, can afford to be deep in many areas because there are many people. So what could individuals do? It's incumbent to individuals to invest in customizing their both work environment and their experience. They need to ramp up their skills. So putting it all together, these technology curves, when you look at the development of technology curves, there's famous Gartner curve, which I improvise here. And then we felt that due to pandemics, some of these curves were flattened. But then on the other hand, others have been sped up. And there are different technologies that could be mapped to these. For example, AI machine learning remained the same. Smart buildings, smart cities probably slowed down. New era of distributed offices has sped up. And then others fall into many other places. However, we don't necessarily care only for driving technology for the benefit of investments and earning money. Some technologies have been slowed down, so you might be losing money. Others might be thriving. What we witness in the world is that we really want to build back better. So we are willing to give back some of these revenues in order to have the better world. What are these factors that impact workforce today? I like to think about them as subtuple helix. They are first and foremost societal, economic, ecological, which are also influenced by technological, and these technological and others form a really complex landscape because there's a lot of relationship with them. Technological factors also influence industry, government, and academia. And each one of them can be divided in many more, such as increased diversity, global workforce as a norm, ethics, trustworthiness, economics are rise of emerging economies, changing industry landscape, changing balance of power, geographical distribution of resources. Ecological include safety and future pandemics, overpopulation and reverse migration, global warming. And then technological factors, not technologies, include remote office and distance economy, closing the gap in the skill mismatch, new supply chain and safety policy, liability and risk. As you can see, these are really complex factors that create even more complex landscape with a lot of interplay. And then there are enabling technologies. I'm not going to read them, but we categorize them into personal, automation, infrastructure, and security. There are many other potential categorization and many more technologies, but we felt for these times, these are really the most important. They are also, just like factors, technologies are also very interrelated. This was our assumption before we got survey and input from these panels. We felt that economic and technological are most closely tied, and then technological and societal as well. And you will see for some we guessed right, for others we guessed wrong. And then we got a similar thing for technologies. Relationship, for example, between infrastructure and security is really the largest one. You will see the results at the end in a little bit more different format. If you go to the next level of detail for individual technologies and factors, it's really complex, really complex relationship. You can only guess some like this yellow are big and some green perhaps. But they can also drive you to some conclusions, such as that ecological aspects have more limited impact, technology impact, workforce sizing, skills needed require way of working, economic impacts, investment in tech, demand for specific skills, etc. But largely, you cannot deduce much from this, only select insights. And then there's the risk versus benefit of having different technologies adopted. And there's a really excellent article, which is available from IEEE Computer. There's also preprint available. What kind of risk of abuse versus potential benefit is there for underrepresented minorities and people compared to general? There are caretakers, there are women, trans and non-binary, bipolar immigrants, people with disabilities. So pandemics have and technologies have created some potential benefit for them, but also risk of abuse. I will refer you to look at that paper, really interesting one. As a consequence of these panels, we draw a lot of conclusions, such as geo-insights. And I classified all these 10 in the continents. In Asia, for example, they really cared for individuals in times of pandemics. They focus on general workforce, not just IT like we've done, not just white and blue collar, but anybody really in the workforce. In sub-Saharan Africa, they care about broadband. Africa made devices because of the bias introduced. In Latin America, they thought that internet is only available for mid-class and up, so that limits education. In Europe and MENA, they spoke about purpose, which is increasingly more important than revenues. They spoke about new collars. And then in North America, they really focus about people, education, transformation. And then there are some global insights around border and sovereignty issues, about re-education and rural divide, which was really, for example, bringing similarities across Asia, Africa, Latin America, Canada, and Europe. And then there are some general observations. Some of industries are severely impacted by pandemics, by dramatically reducing demand, and there's nothing you can help there. Technology can help their workforce too, but nothing can really substantially reverse lack of demand. So for example, in transportation, especially air, Oil and gas, because of the lack of travel, the demand went down. Tourism, it's only waking up again now, but it was in a terrible shape. Some of the technologies and approaches are applicable across many fields. For example, AI, machine learning, cybersecurity, digital transformation, disaster recovery, all of them can help with or without pandemics. So they were able to accelerate. Healthcare was probably one of the most impacted technologies and industries, and it has shown amazing speed in vaccine creation, increased use of robots, digital health passport, digital twins, and sharp increase in telemedicine. You know, doctors are now much more willing to do remote visits. So that was what we thought before with some early insights. Now, let's talk a little bit about survey, and I'll go quickly through a lot of statistics. You can look at the slides for yourself. You can email me if you have any questions. So the details, as I mentioned, the random selection of 15,000 IEEE members were approached. Data collection went for 2 weeks, 22nd September through 15th October. As I mentioned, survey took place after we conducted all of the panels. Respondents were about 10%. Margin of error was pretty small. Individuals were asked to evaluate likelihood and desirability of these 15 factors and technologies. And then few questions were derived per each factor technology to make it more interesting survey. As you can see, in terms of age, other than those who did not respond, the most population was on average 60 years old, and then there were also some younger ones. It's pretty healthy distribution, I would say. In terms of education, most are PhD masters. This is the only place where not answered was smaller. We've had, again, good distribution of expertise area and experience range. Don't get fooled by this NA because there's many more below, so there's quite a bit of those who answered. Most experience ages between 20 and 29. You can see those people here replied most. And then employment type, lots of industry, which we really appreciated. Some academia, a lot of other were also industry like management, and then grad students, self-employed, and many others in smaller numbers. We tried for gender distribution. I think it reflects approximately the IEEE membership distribution. And here are the insights. This is really the most interesting for me. We created this diagram which maps factors and later on technologies in this map of likelihood versus desirability. What is really interesting is what kind of insights can we derive from these? And it's color-coded by economic, societal, ecological, and technological. There are other ways how we sliced it. For me, surprise was about changing balance of power, that it has the lowest likelihood and lowest desirability. Don't forget, these are all positives, so take the relative relationship as some indicator, not the absolute numbers. It's still pretty high there. It was surprising to me because I felt that changing balance of power is taking place, but obviously people surveyed did not believe, and they even more so felt that it's not desirable. The other insight I got is about transparency. This is a little bit different insight here. People felt that it's very desirable, but it's very little likely that it will take place. We also compared the same relationships in the likelihood distribution. You can see that rise of emerging economies is the highest, followed by new supply chain. This is likelihood. And it's kind of obvious that emerging economies are rising, new supply chain. As I said earlier, transparency is the lowest, followed by the changing balance of power. Others are here. You can see what these colors, shapes, arrows, and dots mean. Just for a quick explanation, what you really care is average. These are triangles, these white triangles here. Then outliers. Outliers are here. You can see there are some outliers, some people who felt that rise of emerging economies did not exist, and some who felt that there's changing of balance power is way out of reach. And then these arrows correspond to 5% and 95%. Vertical arrow is median, so you can have average, which is different than median. And these boxes represent IQR or interquartile range, lower 25 and higher is 75. So 25 of people were within here and 75 within here. I'll only repeat this once. And then there's desirability distribution by factors. You can see again that changing of balance of power is least desirable here by far, followed by safety policy, et cetera, et cetera. So you can look at this at your leisure. I'd like to move on to more interesting things. In terms of technologies, and I'll skip other way of representing, but I want to stick here. This one was interesting to me in terms of bring your own thing in Internet of Things. People felt that it's neither likely to happen nor that it's desirable. So that was really shocking to me because, I mean, we're all bringing our phones. It became a norm. A lot of people are bringing their own laptops to work, but for some reason, 1,500 people pretty consistently did not think that it's either desirable or likely. We'll see what future will bring in a few years. The other thing that was surprising to me was blockchain in terms of very low likelihood. Desirability, it's okay, I can understand that, but people felt that it's very unlikely. It's the second one. That was really surprising to me. What was a little bit less surprising is quantum computing. I completely agree about desirability, which is pretty decent, but they felt that it's also not likely, which is also consistent with my understanding that it will take at least other 20 years, despite the huge spike in interest, conferences, etc., which is probably appropriate. But it's unlikely it will happen in the like next year, 2 or 3 years. And then education, training, and accreditation was also surprising to me that it's pretty low here. As I mentioned, sorry, I forgot robotics. Robotics was surprising to me that it was pretty higher than maybe in terms of likelihood that even telepresence or AI machine learning or computing and edge. So that was surprising. It's by small margin, but still people feel that robotics is highly likely to happen. I'll skip these. You're welcome to look at those at your leisure. Again, I'd like to move to other insights. Then there's factors correlation. I mentioned the correlation earlier. It's a little bit different representation here. We'll try to get the other one as well. What was surprising to me is very high correlation between societal and technological. It was surprising to me that it's largest. I knew there's correlation. Even more surprising was very low relationship between economic and societal factors, as well as technological and economic. I felt that this one would have been the strongest, but it was not. And then in terms of desirability, the same thing, really the same three. This one highest, all the differences are a little bit different. The other interesting thing is who are the drivers of the change. This is really important. And you can see for me, the insight is that really industry, the business is driver of the change. Only in small number of cases like greater adoption of smart buildings and cities is where government is the higher, as well as in more smart technology for building in underdeveloped regions. But most others, it's really the industry that drives. Kind of obvious, but still it's worth noting. We also use these word clouds for both missing factors. Very little found, like retirement is what we didn't take into account, and benefits and political, but they are kind of assumed in others. And the same for missing technologies. One really noted big one is energy, battery, and power, and we'll try to take care of that in the future. And then solar, which is also related to this. So what kind of recommendations can we derive? This is really the most important outcome. Before we do that, I'd like to point out some transformation that is taking place in terms of factors. This is also derived from the insights. So from regional workforce market, we're going to global workforce market. From offices, we're going to hybrid. People care less about benefits and more about the purpose of companies when they choose the company to work for. There's loyalty moving from corporate to ecosystems. And a lot of innovation hubs like Silicon Valley, a lot of companies are moving to low-tax regions like Austin and others. In terms of societal transformation, continued education is moving to perpetual, white blue collars to new collars, diversity is more broadly observed as also equity and inclusion. Works as a means of living is transforming to works as a mean of fulfillment. One employer for life is transforming into continuous change of jobs. In terms of ecological factors, reactive is going to preventive, not just for COVID, but for other climate changes and other things. Protecting the planet is transforming to returning to the planet, return to the planet much more than we used to. And then signing the treaties is moving towards governments acting more collaboratively. In terms of technological factors, automated is slowly but securely moving to autonomous. Homogeneity in terms of generalization, like single ISA for processors, is moving to heterogeneity, to specialization, to plethora of accelerators. It's also true for other IT technologies. Social networks are transforming to sensor networks, and stovepipes in technology to interdisciplinary co-design. Now, in terms of transformation of technologies, in terms of personal, corporate IT devices are moving to cost-share broadband in bring your own, even though most people don't do it. I mean, at home, few corporate are giving you money for broadband, so a lot of people are already assuming that. Economical divide in education is transforming to digital divide. Centralized data analytics to AI and edge in terms of automation. Telepresence is transforming to AR, VR, human machine, etc. AI assisted is transforming to explainable and mission critical IOPS. Robotics in fenced environment is moving towards real-time responsive collaboration. Voice recognition is transforming to hands-free voice control. You've seen with Alexa, many others. In terms of infrastructure, assisted driving is transforming to autonomous. 5G and others are transforming to drones, satellites for communication in rural. Quantum communication is slowly, very slowly, but still taking place towards quantum. And then voice recognition, as I already mentioned. Sorry, this is redundant here. In terms of security, privacy preserving is going towards privacy-driven, and then AI-assisted cyber analysts are replaced or augmented with AI machine learning analysts. So what are the recommendations we can make? You will see here a summary. I'll go into a little bit more detail per each one of these bullets, but I'd like to emphasize the most important recommendations that we can make for industry, governments, academia, and professional organizations. This is still a mid-report, so it's a little bit incoherent. It's not, it hasn't included all the input we've got. I haven't included the non-structured input we've got from survey from these 1,500 people, as well as from some of the regions. I think I'm only about 20% through those, even though I have intuitively included a lot. So in terms of industry, recommendation to industry that it is all about people. If anyone thinks differently, they are wrong. Any IP that any company has, it is the people they have. It's not the patents, it's not technologies, it's the people who produce those. Because patents become obsolete, technologies also, but people can continue to reproduce. So best people bring best people. If you want to hire best people, you need to already have hired best people. So invest in hiring those few best ones. Industry needs to do training too. They cannot rely on getting training from academia, and government needs to help there. Young people and new technologies are the best attractors for hiring. So focus on new technologies, hire young professionals in addition to experienced ones. They will help you hire others. Offices are useful for junior people to exchange ideas. Old-timers like me and some of my colleagues, they're already used to talking and they can go virtually, but new ones, they really require this tense intimate and really close relationship, brainstorming beside the whiteboard. Hire people who can adapt. Don't hire just experts. Hire experts that can tomorrow bring you new technologies. And then migrating huge workforce into a changing environment is not trivial. So when things change, changing the culture, changing the knowledge is not trivial. There are some examples later on how Deutsche Telekom has retrained its large workforce because government required that. For governments, one needs to look at technology and society. You can't look at one only. Ultimate goal is sustainable workforce in a well-balanced labor system. However, it's required to look at system and individuals in every sector, in business, government, and academia. If you want to change everything, that's how we need to act. We need to work closely with industry and academia to rehire women. A lot of governments have invested tons of money in hiring women after they want to go back after having kids. But just throwing money doesn't help. You need to work very closely with both industry to set up the right expectation, choices of the workplaces, and academia to retrain them. You know, with the speed of technology evolution, you know, in a year, let alone 2 years, sometimes maternity leave in Europe could be very long. And I have already seen that some companies are adapting, allowing both genders to take paternity and maternity leaves to help with the kids. So we really need to focus on this. It's being addressed, but it has to be addressed much, much more. Immigration is missed opportunity. In many countries, and I'm not going to say which one, but the government requires lengthy periods of time for training, and it's a huge missed opportunity for those immigrants who can't be hired to take care of their expertise. And finally, governments need to assist academia and industry with training ethical behavior. That is really important. In terms of academia, retraining new technology like AI is really important. And it also means retraining educators, because a lot of professors who were just left behind in new technologies, it takes a lot of effort to retrain. Interdisciplinary and global technologies are important. Learning never ends. I mentioned earlier perpetual education, and training to learn how to learn. You know, you can't expect to be taught everything. You need to train yourself. You need to learn continuously. There's deep consideration of the human condition, so one has to be careful about the humans, especially in the presence of closed economies, closed schools and everything. There's a lot of requirement to teach persuasion, emotional intelligence, and then also ethical thinking, intercultural awareness, and critical thinking. What could professional organizations like IEEE do? They should really help redefine concepts, because we have hybrid careers more and more. They need to help to balance proper labor markets. We can leverage our power of convening, both in terms of standards, conferences, journals. We have tremendous power of convening, and we're not leveraging out for other products than IEEE products. And there's huge opportunity, missed opportunity here. IEEE USA was advised to educate legislators. They already do that in US. There is Congressional Day, but it could be done much, much, much more, and potentially be done in other countries. And I know that IEEE is already doing that for Europe, for India, and other places. Then IEEE can help derive principles, best practices for trust, transparency, accountability, and policies. IEEE could help, this is really interesting, these last two, help students bridge the gap from school to work. We always emphasize this as a missed opportunity. So as long as it's missed opportunity, there's something to be done here. This is coming from the panels, what they told us. And also help international students with internships that are limited by immigration and visas. Very tactical, very near term, but could open up many other opportunities. I'm not sure that I have enough time to go through more detail, because in this previous slide, I went through, I discussed a lot of each one of these. They're repeated in much more detail here. So I would recommend that you go through them on your own. The same is true for industry, governments, for academia, and then for professional organizations, of which I took IEEE as one example. So what is the overall summary? I came close to the end, and most of the summaries have already been explained. These recommendations, these insights are really gist of what we've done. But let me nevertheless draw some final summary. So as I already mentioned, the pandemic has created stress on the current humankind, our values, daily values, our existence. Technology is critical at times of pandemics, especially on the workforce. And in return, pandemics also helped aggressive technology evolution. As they say, necessity is mother of invention, as proven by extremely quick vaccine development and other medicine. In general, technology predictions or trends were always popular. You know, people like to hear what future brings them, especially if you make mistake. They like to hear that. But now these predictions are becoming increasingly useful, essential, because we really need to know when do we open up economies, when do we close it again with all these waves of viruses, how do we react to them, how do we predict near term, how do we predict long term. We continue to experiment with approaches, as you've seen, with panels, with surveys, and many others. And we are becoming more and more systematic and rigorous in our predictions. What we would like to seek from you is, what do you think of our predictions for future workforce? What have we missed? What is different? Feel free to approach us or our colleagues with feedback, questions. I'll give you the pointers, and they'll be available. You don't need to take the notes. Slides will be available, other than some background slides that I'll quickly go through. And we will keep you in the loop as we progress with the report development. We promise, and we will send report to all panelists, and if you approach us, we'll send report to you too, but don't be afraid, it will be widely advertised. Our next steps are listed here. I won't go through details, but we have a lot more work to do in terms of survey, like geoanalysis, demographics, additional correlations, question level of details, analyze non-structured data, and then a lot of insights, recommendations. We need to slice the feedback from panels much more, better correlate recommendations. We need to really stare in these graphs that we created and identify the insights, and then complete this report. There's a lot of further reading, and there'll be much more. I didn't have time to put all of these. Some are IEEE related, others are general. We've got a lot of testimonials. We didn't ask for those. These are testimonials that people put, especially in Europe, Latin America, Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. They were much more versed on social media, so these are some examples. In general, they liked it a lot. I want to point out and give my deep thanks to the IEEE staff team. Without them, this wouldn't have been possible at all. I can guarantee you that. They put a lot of effort, and each one of them contributed to their own region. Patrick was our all-out star, helped with everything. And then Michael Werman, very smart guy, helped us with survey and a lot of insights. I think it enhanced tremendously. And then we have regional help with Sub-Saharan Africa, Singapore, Europe, and MENA, India, and China, where we didn't have that close relationships like we already had. So without any single one of them, it would have been much, much worse report, or not even possible at all in many cases. And then this is the team I presented, but the team consists of really 8 of us. Tom Coughlin, Nita, and I presented to most panels, and then the others contributed in a variety of ways. Eitan Frachtenburg here helped create all the graphs. Martin will help the insights. Phil, Tom, and others are going to do the writing. Paolo started spearheading this. Roberto, who is the chair of Industry Advisory Board, outgoing chair, Industry Advisory Board, Future Directions Committee, a lot of insights throughout. So I'm deeply thankful to all of them. Again, without them, it would have been a small fraction. So thank you very much. Here are the pointers to some of us. I also wanted to just give you some flavor of what we haven't showed to you. There's a lot of backup slides. These will not be included, but I just want to show you a little bit. A lot more insights, additional insights, and then regional reports. This is how we've done them. We selected people, and then they are listed at attendees here, and we on-site recorded these recommendations to academia, to industry, and legislators, etc. So that's all. Thank you very much. I welcome your questions. We left about 15 more minutes here.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Milojicic. We actually have quite a few questions that have come in, and if anybody else has any other questions, they're welcome to submit those. There's one that I'd like to start with, and this was a more recent question, actually. It says, in some regions, particularly in Africa, but even in the US, gig work is either dominant or an important factor. Was there some discussion of these trends in the regional meetings?
I'm sorry, what kind of work is dominant?
Gig work. The gig economy.
Oh, yeah. We did, gig economy is what we haven't as much addressed. This is something that we plan to do, but yes, we discussed it a little bit. We haven't reported it. It's part of those things that is still on the to-do list, but it was mentioned a few times.
Okay, very good. Early on, you had mentioned that you were surprised by some of the results. One of the audience members was wondering if perhaps the wording of the questions might have brought about some of this surprise.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there was a lot of roll-up, and it's absolutely possible that the wording, we're going to go back and inspect it. So we'll do all of that. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
It's not just wording, but also the roll-up. And in certain cases, there's correlation. But, you know, ultimately, you could, as you roll up, when you look at these relationships at the categories, it should disappear. And it should be supplemented by the panels. And then ultimately, these graphs don't matter at the end. What matters are recommendations, the quality of recommendations. They count most.
All right, very good. The next question is, could changing balance of powers' low desirability and likelihood be attributed to the fact that the survey was skewed to older or more educated individuals?
Could be, absolutely could be. I don't want to disclose what the questions were. In this case, I think it's more the type of the questions.
Okay. This one is a more recent question that we've gotten. Let me click on it. This person would like to have the backup slides also. They said they looked very useful. So we will keep that in mind.
Yeah. So it's not like we don't want to share the backup slides. At the very end, we'll share everything. I just promised all the panelists that I will not share without their permission. So what is happening, I'm now rolling up information, and we still want to polish these backup slides. There's like, as I mentioned, 210 slides at the end of the last panel, and each of the regional panels was about 10, 15, up to 20 or more slides. They are extremely interesting. They will all be available as a large report. So what we'll do, what you've seen here is not a report. That's the slide set that will be companion to report. We already started writing report. Report will be the ultimate product. The slide set, the first part, will be companion to the report, and then we'll have the much larger slide set, which will include, assuming we get permission from all the panelists, which will include all geo reports and substantially richer set of graphs, insights, etc. So everything will eventually be available. The earliest availability will be for the report and companion report, and then the others will follow.
Okay, very good. We've got a new question that's just come in, and this one looks like a really good one. Did you consider the impact of politician and political forces, since they may have a huge impact?
Yeah, so that's what I circled on that. If you remember the word cloud, that's something we have not explicitly called out. We, however, assume that political aspects were covered primarily under government and then partially under societal.
Okay. There is one person who was concerned that some of the things that were being advocated in here might sound a little like age discrimination. I'm not sure what that's referring to, but it would be somewhere about halfway through your presentation. Do you have any thoughts on that, about age discrimination in this?
In what way?
Yeah, it doesn't say, unfortunately. Maybe they can reword their question and bring that back to us.
Yeah, if you refer to age of the here, yeah, I don't know. If you repeat again question, I'd be glad. All I'm saying is that most people were around 60 here, and then there were some younger people here. I don't know what else. If you point out to specifics, I'd be glad to elaborate, especially if you remember the slide number.
Okay, very good. So the next one is one of the missing word cloud items was will. Could you comment on that? Yeah, that's a challenging one to. I'm guessing they mean their own will, what the volition of the individual.
I'm not sure what meaning of the will is used in the word cloud versus what you are suggesting, because it might be just the verb will. I'm not sure that it's will like inheritance and these things.
So here seems to be a clarification of the earlier question. It sounded like there was an advocacy for firms to express a preference for younger IT workers over older ones.
Okay, so I remember exactly what I said, and I said also in addition to younger, in addition to experienced people. I'm not advocating anything. I was just reporting what was said at the panel. Let me go back to this. I think I know exactly where it is. But I thank you for bringing it up, because indeed it could be interpreted that way. Okay, so that's what I brought up from, you referred probably to this, young people and new tech and new technologies as a tractor for hiring. So it could be, let me do my interpretation. Usually it's non-trivial to hire young people. I think that's what. So if you already have young people, you'll be able to hire young people. If you have experienced people, you'll probably be able to hire experienced people. But again, that's what I can give you. I think I even have here more detailed. Okay, so here, young people change jobs often, not understanding employment quality, building career in one company. It is all about people. So that's one part of it. So given that they change, in order to retain them, you want to keep the young people as well.
Okay.
But there's definitely no discrimination, in my mind at least.
Very good. The next question we've got here is, technologies such as robotics and machine learning may change the entire workforce structure, and so will make many of these recommendations less relevant. What are your thoughts on that statement?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there will be always changes. I mean, just like pandemic was a big reset. With robots, nevertheless, we've got a history of maybe 50 years. You know, when I visited in Japan, Waseda University and Tokyo University especially, they show generations of 50 years old robots. And it's the process. So these kinds of efforts need to be repeated periodically, and also every time when there are big resets.
Okay, very good. This person is returning to the earlier question, and I think I like this, what they say. They say they would argue for intergenerational teams.
Yeah, I agree with you. I completely agree. I mean, and it's not just intergenerational. It also has to be diverse in many other dimensions. Age is just one of the differences. It could be gender, you know, it could be race, whatever. So the more we have diversity, the better. I think the problem that was emphasized by people who communicated that, and again, this is not my opinion, this is what I summarized from the panel, was that it was hard to hire young people and hard to retain them, and that's where it was coming from. It wasn't comparing necessarily or at all younger versus older. But I agree, intergenerational teams are good. Because you can't have only young people, you can't have only experienced people, you can't have only superstars. You need to have a balance. I mean, take a look at sports. You usually have one or two, at most three superstars, but you need to have some people who will fill the gaps, who will put everything together. I mean, there are many, many roles. As a past soccer coach, I know this best.
Okay. Very good. I think we've come to the end of our questions, and we're actually coming to the end of our hour. So I'd like to take this moment to thank Dr. Milojicic. I'd also like to thank all of you for attending. Dr. Milojicic's webinar on the future of workforce feeds in well into the November webinars. So this one is looking forward, and the ones that we'll be doing in November will be looking backward. We'll bring you several webinars on the history of computing. It'll be a celebration of the 75th anniversary of the Computer Society and the 50th anniversary of the Distinguished Visitors Program. Our first webinar on Moore's Law will kick off the month, and that'll be on November 2nd at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We'll have 7 more Distinguished Lecturer Webinar Series webinars between then and November 12th, many of them on the topic of history. I recommend that you register now. And our Build Your Career webinar series will have a presentation on persuasive conversations, why low-impact words don't work. And that'll be presented by Elsa Velasco-Paul. That'll be on November 18th. Registration is now open, and we'll be sending you a link to these future events along with the recording of this webinar. Again, Dr. Milojicic, thank you very much for your presentation. It was great.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.